Good afternoon and welcome to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management VW Grant Options for School Bus Fleets webinar. My name is Carl Lisek, Executive Director of South Shore Clean Cities, and I will be your host and presenter today. We will also be joined by Mr. Shawn Seals, Senior Environmental Manager for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. We're excited to share with you today information on how the Indiana VW Grant Program can help your school transportation department with cleaner school bus options. All attendees are in listen-only mode, and today's webinar will be recorded and made available on the South Shore Clean Cities website. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the question box on the panel to the right, and we will address them toward the end of this presentation. First, I'd like to take a moment to speak about our organization, South Shore Clean Cities, as well as the Clean Cities program as a whole. South Shore Clean Cities, founded in 1999, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization serving the entire state of Indiana. We are among the U.S. Department of Energy's more than 75 Clean Cities coalitions. The organizations support the nation's energy and energy security by building partnerships to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels, energy efficient mobility systems, and other fuel-saving technologies and practices. South Shore Clean Cities achieves this in a number of ways, including the advancement of alternative fuel vehicles and sustainable fuel technologies, such as electric vehicles and their charging infrastructure. The efforts reduce the nation's dependence on imported oil, improve air quality, support Indiana jobs, drive economic development, and promote improved quality of life. Earlier this year, South Shore Clean Cities was designated by the U.S. Department of Energy to serve the entire state of Indiana, making us the only U.S. Department of Energy designated Clean Cities coalition in the state of Indiana. We are excited to take our proven methods for success statewide to help benefit all Indiana organizations. A formal name change reflecting our new statewide designation is anticipated soon so stay tuned for that. In the last decade, South Shore Clean Cities members have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 607,000 tons and displaced more than 93 million gallons of gasoline. This is the emissions reduction equivalent of removing roughly 180,000 passenger vehicles from the road for 1 year. In 2020 alone, we assisted stakeholders with a successful acquisition of more than $9.3 million in grant funds for more than 175 vehicles and pieces of equipment, including fueling and charging infrastructure. $5.3 million of those funds were awarded from Indiana VW Mitigation funding for 110 vehicles and pieces of equipment. Among the many benefits of the Clean Cities program is our ability to work with stakeholders to successfully find, apply for, implement, and manage grant-funded sustainable transportation projects, including those supported by the Indiana Volkswagen program we're discussing today. It is through our experience and long-standing relationships with our members and partners that we have been able to achieve the success. To date, IDEM and South Shore Clean Cities represents our state promoting programs and projects through the Indiana Clean Diesel Coalition, or MCDI. This provides our stakeholders with firsthand information on grants and opportunities to decarbonize your fleet. As a transportation stakeholder, we can provide your services and access to Indiana approved vendors who are approved by the U.S. Department of Energy, U.S. Department of EPA, Indiana Department of Environmental Management. So please know that not all technology is created equal, and we've seen applications being rejected because of the wrong technology provider or grant application missed a crucial piece of information. So please don't be fooled. Electric school buses. Obviously, our team prides itself on our success and ability to work across the state of Indiana to assist your school corporation. Working with you and your team by doing due diligence to analyze where potentially to install charging, training of your mechanics, and many other aspects of electric school bus implementation. We also pride ourselves as acting as a project manager to potentially answer questions for school boards, business managers, and maybe how to leverage other funding mechanisms that will allow for public-private partnerships. As you can see in round one of the electric school bus grant applications with Indiana VW Mitigation, and actually round two, we were very successful with 7 awards that have been made by Indiana VW Mitigation for electric school buses. So we've been involved with the deployment of all the electric school buses in our state. Also on non-electric school buses, you can see we've had pretty much about a 97% success rate of all the non-electric school buses being awarded through partnerships with South Shore Clean Cities. Holding your team's hand, planning for future deployment, and assisting with RFPs, we have made the process as simplistic and providing your school with the tools to move forward. We don't want your school to work in a silo, so let us help your team minimize your costs with our experience. Our goal as a statewide coalition is to provide each school corporation with education and training that will continue to reduce emissions, but will also allow us to leverage additional future grant opportunities as they become available and make sure that you understand what and how things work. Please, please know that if your school corporation is looking at capital leases or any other type of lease for your school equipment, this is not allowable, and I know Shawn will be talking about this shortly. So here's really through Carmel Clay Schools. This was one of the first electric school bus projects in the state of Indiana. We've also have the Crown Point Schools here in northern Indiana. They're going to have the first electric school bus in Indiana. And also working with propane school buses, we've seen Michigan City area schools and their implementation of propane powered school buses, and then also Wani community schools also here in Northeast Indiana. So if you're looking for ways to improve your fleet's performance or interested in learning more about how South Shore Clean Cities can help you maximize the benefits of this and other grant programs, please contact our office anytime at 219-644-3690, and I will be happy to assist you. And so before we switch things over to Mr. Shawn Seals from IDEM, we'd like to take a quick poll. And this question is has your school district previously applied for any type of VW funding? So please press 1 for yes, no, 2 for no, but I'm interested in applying for this round, or 3, I'm interested in learning more about this application process. So we'll give you about 10 seconds to respond, and then we'll see the responses, and then we thank you for that. So just give you a few more seconds here. So according to our poll, as we're collecting some of these responses, what we're seeing is that 25% of you have applied in the past for VW funding, 22% have not, but are interested in applying for this round, and 56% have actually are interested in learning more about this application. So we will be reaching out to each and every one of you to help you with that implementation. So at this time, I would like to now introduce Mr. Shawn Seals. He's the Senior Environmental Manager with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management's Office of Air Quality. Shawn also serves as Indiana's Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund Administrator and will be providing an overview of the current grant opportunity for your schools. Shawn, go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you very much, Carl. Always a pleasure to work with you all up there on some clean diesel programs. And as you know from the back in the day when we did a lot of in-person presentations, I always like to do a lot of polls with shows of hands during the presentations as well. So it was interesting to hear roughly 75% of the folks that are with us today either they have not applied previously and are interested in some capacity. So that's good to hear. So let's go ahead and bounce to the next slide. So quickly, here's what we're going to go over today. This presentation will include some information that's beyond just school bus stuff, but it just is sort of to give you a larger reference to work from. But we'll be talking specifically about school buses for the majority of this, and any Q&A that exists at the end of our presentation today will also be focused on school buses. So we'll touch on the 2021, sorry, let's back up. We're going to touch on the 2021 program overall, round 3, a little bit about who is eligible to apply, because sometimes that becomes a question. What percentages of the project costs would actually be covered by the program. Round 3, revisions and reminders. This is going to be an important part for us to spend a little bit of time on, just so that we make sure that we cover all of the bases there. And we don't spend a lot of time or energy, or you all don't spend a lot of time or energy either, on a application, just making sure we're all on the same page on the front end. We'll talk about what is going to be the expectation for any of the equipment that is replaced. And then we'll quickly walk through the application process, as well as the selection process, and give you a little bit of an idea on what the criteria are that we'll be using to score the applications once received, and then a general estimate of what the timeline will look like. So in round 3, things are a little bit different than they have been in round 1 and round 2 of the program. Rounds 1 and 2, we had about $9.86 million that we put on the street for clean diesel projects through the program. This year, because in rounds 1 and rounds 2, we had some projects that may not have completed, or maybe we just didn't really feel like the list of projects that we received were quite to the level that we were hoping they would be. And as such, we had some remaining funds that we could sort of reallocate towards round 3 programs. Instead of 9.86 this round, we're looking at a $12 million program, so 12 million on the street. These figures here that you see, this 4.26 million for class 4 through 8 on-road vehicles. This is not a school bus specific line. These are carve-outs that were developed in cooperation with the Indiana Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund Committee that was appointed by the governor. And what we ultimately decided we wanted to do was, of that 9.86, how do we really want to break this down based on the feedback that we've received from our stakeholders? So 4.26 million of this 12 is going to go to class 4 through 8 on roads, but that's not school buses. School buses have their own 2 carve-outs, actually. Each of the first 2 rounds, we have had at least $1.99 million for non-electric powered school buses, and at least $850,000 for electric powered school buses. And then we also set aside 2.73 for non-road equipment and vehicle types. And what we found is, you know, with this $12 million, we've got about 2.17 million that's going to be kind of additional funding, and we're sort of identifying that as IDEM discretionary projects that we can and hope to be able to award within those categories listed above. So some of those funds may find their way to school buses, some might find their way to other programs, but we're maintaining flexibility to put that 2.17 where it seems to make the most sense. Grant awards are going to range anywhere from the low end of $50,000 up to the high end of $2 million. I think it's worth noting that if you've got a really good project, but your budget only allows you to ask for $49,000 in a grant based on the percentage that the program might cover, don't hesitate to still submit that application. We have awarded in the past several really good projects that may not have necessarily met that lower grant award threshold. We don't want to lose track of those. You know, if you're close to 50 but a little under it, don't hesitate to go ahead and apply, because we'd hate to not fund a really good project. The likelihood of us actually doing a $2 million project, we haven't done any that large yet. We find that the demand for the funds is large enough that we don't want to necessarily have, you know, 1 or 2 projects eating up the majority of the funds. But, you know, there is always that possibility. In round 3, you'll see that the applications are due June 1st, Tuesday, 2021. And you'll also note that most of the projects are expected to be completed by the end of next year, so December 2022. So who is eligible to apply for funds from this program? Well, since I know we're focused on schools here, whether it is a public school bus fleet or a private school bus fleet, you are eligible for funding under the program. So don't hesitate to take a look at the application process. School bus years and the percentage of the project's cost that will be covered by the program. You'll see one of the things here, it says model year 2009 and older. And in the case of school buses, it actually is just 2009 and older. In some of our other vehicle categories, there actually is, another date, an older date beyond 2009. But school buses, they decided to maintain a little bit of flexibility for school shuttle and transit buses, so that's good for you all. What isn't necessarily great for you all is, as we have moved year to year to year through the program, the model year itself is not moving with the program. That model year 2009 is very explicit in the consent decree between the Department of Justice and Volkswagen, so it will stay at 2009 and older. This second bullet, I'm going to mention this probably a few times because it is important, and I think it's worth noting. This is a significant change in this round of funding. In conversation with the Volkswagen committee, it was determined that in round 3, we would do no diesel-to-diesel repower or replacement projects for school buses or any other on-road equipment. So in round 3, all of the on-road projects are going to be focused on electric or alternative fuels. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Now, repowers will be covered up to 40%, but I realize that in the school industry, repowering a school bus is typically not popular, nor in many cases practical. So we're more than likely looking at electric alternatives. And once again, repowers in that instance, probably not likely. So the final bullet is really where we need to spend put our focus, if you will. And that is that if you are looking to replace a current diesel powered school bus with an alternatively fueled school bus that is non-electric, then the program will cover up to 25% of that cost. And if you're looking at going down that all-electric school bus path, the program will cover up to 75% of that cost. And my guess is that many, or maybe most on the call, do understand the cost difference between, say, a propane school bus and an all-electric school bus, because it looks really attractive at that 75% reimbursement rate. But just know going into it that, a propane school bus is, roughly $100,000, give or take, and an electric school bus is going to be roughly $400,000, give or take. So notable difference in the cost of those. So just keep that in mind as you consider your options. So I said we wanted to spend a little time on round 3 revisions and reminders. I've already touched on the fact that there's going to be no diesel to diesel repower or replacement projects in round 3 for on-road equipment. No contingent funding will be considered. And what this means is really it kind of boils down to a couple different scenarios. So if you're trying to put together, let's say, 2 grant programs, and our program is dependent upon or contingent upon you receiving funds from this other program, that application is not going to be seen as complete and will not be reviewed. The funds that go into this program, your matching funds, must be your funds and not someone else's. They can't be based on someone else's. And it can't be, so that's the contingency that we're talking about, because the bullet below kind of addresses that in a different way. Carl did touch on the no lease or installment purchase programs are eligible for funding. This is a really important thing that unfortunately has kind of presented itself to us in the previous round of our program. Understanding that capital leases do provide an entity an opportunity to spread the costs of equipment purchases, the challenge that you run into when you have a reimbursement-based program is that we can only reimburse based on costs that are incurred. We can't front load a lease, nor can we front load the installment purchase through a vehicle loan program. So these are going to have to be outright purchases. So just make sure to keep that in mind. And then it's sort of similar to the bullet above, any third-party funds being used in the project must be either in-house or fully dedicated. So if you do have third-party funds of some sort, let's say you received a grant from another entity, as long as those third-party funds are actually in-house and are dedicated specifically to the project, yes, those can be used as your match, but they can't be contingencies, one grant depending upon the other, if you will. In-kind matches are not considered to be a part of an applicant's required match. Easiest way to look at it is this is a cash-only program. And then the last piece, just to make my life a little bit easier, and that is that we are putting a hard limit of 10-page narrative section on the applications. There have been times where we would get a 25-page application for a $60,000 program. And although the program may be fantastic, you probably could have told us that in 10 pages. So just remember that 10-page narrative limit, if you would, please. Now, when you apply for these funds, you do need to keep in mind that there are replacement requirements. So all of the replacement buses must meet at least these following categories or criteria. So the vehicle that you're wanting to purchase with our funds must be of the same type and similar gross vehicle weight rating or horsepower of the equipment that you currently have, the bus that you currently have. It must perform the same function as the bus that you have as well. So for example, if you have, we can't necessarily replace a very focused small route special circumstance bus with a much higher mileage general use bus. I mean, you just want to make sure that they're performing the same function. The key here on the third bullet is that any piece of equipment that is replaced through this program must be scrapped or ordered or rendered permanently disabled and returned to the OEM for remanufacture. So generally what this means is if we're going to purchase you a new school bus through the program or help you purchase one through the program, that previous bus does need to be destroyed or deemed permanently disabled in some way. Typically this is drilling a hole in the engine block so that the engine isn't running anymore. And based on the language of the consent decree, it also requires that you cut the frame rails of the bus between the axles. So you'll want to keep that in mind as well. And then you'll have to provide evidence that you've disposed and scrapped of it accordingly. And the folks at South Shore have a lot of experience with this because as you saw in some of the slide that they presented earlier, they've been pretty successful in getting funds from the program. So they have a pretty good idea of what it takes to demonstrate that it was appropriately disposed of or scrapped. So let's talk a little bit about the application, the prioritization, and the selection process. So it was around March 22nd that we posted the RFP on IDEM's Volkswagen portal website. And everybody's going to have, you're going to submit those applications in accordance with the requirements and expectations of this solicitation. Those are located towards the end of the RFP packet. It's kind of a bulleted, numbered list, if you will, that identifies these are the things that an application packet needs to include. IDEM's going to get those applications. We're going to review them, we're going to score them, and we're going to prioritize them. And then we're going to make recommendations to the Volkswagen committee. The next step is we'll end up having a meeting with the Volkswagen committee, and they're going to review our recommendations, and ultimately they'll make the final selection for awards. I will say that IDEM's recommendations have pretty consistently been met with 100% approval of the Volkswagen committee. So we should feel pretty good about the recommendations that we make. So if you impress us, you will probably impress the Volkswagen committee as well. And then shortly after the recommendation by the committee is made, we'll work through the process of announcing the formal awards and begin the funding agreement process with the awardees. I always think it's important to be transparent about what a good application might look like compared to one that maybe isn't quite so good. And the evaluation criteria and making sure that everybody knows what that is on the front end, I think is a really easy and important way to do that. So the criteria that we will be using to score the round 3 programs are going to be based on these criteria you have on your screen right now. And the first and largest is, of course, the cost effectiveness of the project. And that is simply a calculation based on the dollars per ton of NOx reduced. Just to give you a little sense for the process, IDEM will be asking in that application process for the specific fleet or the fleet specific information, and you'll be providing that in a spreadsheet. It's pretty straightforward. It's the kind of stuff you're already tracking in your fleets anyway. We will use that information of your current fleet as well as the fleet that you're looking to implement, whatever those might be, whether they're propane, electric, or whatever. We will take that information and we'll input it into US EPA's diesel emission quantifier. That's what we have used in the first 2 rounds. It's worked very well for us. We're going to continue to use that moving forward. And what's good about the diesel emission quantifier is that once we put in the relevant data, it will calculate for us the cost effectiveness of a project, and it will also calculate for us the total NOx emissions reduced, as well as fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5. Since the Volkswagen program is very focused on NOx emission reduction, that's why we're focusing a lot of the language here and the criteria on NOx as opposed to other pollutants. The second highest point categories would include transformational potential. And, this really boils down to, are you as a entity continuing to use an alternative fuel, or are you moving in the direction away from diesel powered towards a different fuel, whether that's for school buses, let's say propane or electric. Generally speaking, if you are continuing the use of an alternative fuel, you'll get 10 points in this category, for example. But if you're taking that first initial and important step in transitioning your fleet to an alternative fuel, in this category, you would get 15 as opposed to the 10. As I mentioned before, the total NOx emission reduction, that's going to come right out of the diesel emission quantifier. The National Ambient Air Quality Standard sensitive areas as a percentage of current standards. Lots of acronyms, a lot of things that might not make a whole lot of sense to you, but ultimately what that means is your county, where is your county in relation to other counties when it comes to ambient air quality standards? These are categories where you're not going to be able to really score more or less points. It's simply a matter of where your school system is located. The same holds true for the air quality benefits to areas with sensitive populations or that bear disproportionate share of air pollution. Once again, these are just geographically specific, not something you can really impact. Leveraging of resources, as I said, no in-kind matches. We're talking about financials only, cash money, if you will. In essence, the more, if you are willing to go over the minimum, you are likely to receive more points than those who just accept the minimum as their cash match. And then the last 2 are kind of, almost refer to them as bonus point areas. Entities registered with the Indiana Secretary of State. Well, for the most part, if you're an Indiana school, you're already going to be registered. And if you're a private contractor doing business at an Indiana school, odds are you're probably registered there as well. So you've got up to 5 points there. And then the last one is focuses on minority women or veterans business enterprises. And do you have a published participation plan? Do you have something that you can show us that demonstrates that you are an MBE, WBE, VBE proactive applicant? If you have that, you need to make sure that you provide that supporting material in your application packet. A website, a URL, a general statement is not adequate. We need to actually see some documentation that makes it clear to us that you are you are in that case eligible for those 5 points. Here is the estimated timeline. So far, so good. I don't foresee a whole lot of slippage from this timeline. So we're looking pretty good here. You know, RFP already on the street, as we know. Tuesday, June 1st, it's going to close. That's about 10 weeks of time from the date that it opened to the date that it closes. We're going to give ourselves probably about 4 more weeks to review, prioritize, and select the projects. That puts us out to about the end of June. Then we're going to take those thoughts to the Volkswagen committee and then get back with folks. You know, we're looking at probably July. It's about 16 weeks later. Grant agreements will be fully executed about a month after we finish up the notification process. So that puts us around 20 weeks out. And it's at that point, if you will, that you can actually begin to incur costs. You cannot incur any costs that you are expecting reimbursed from the program until the date of the final signature on the funding agreements. And the funding agreements are a little bit more streamlined than a lot of our grant agreements that we have within the state, in that the funding agreement is only signed by you or the representative of your school system and IDEM as an agency. We do not have to go through the full-blown Indiana state signature process for these funds. And then, as noted before, the expectation is the end of 2022, projects should be complete. We feel like 93 weeks after posting is a pretty reasonable timeline to get all of that done. And then for those who may have an interest, you know, we've got one other program that will be coming out diesel related later this year. And that is what we refer to as the DieselWise Indiana with DERA option. And it will be coming out in the fall of this year. And that is the completion of the presentation. I think I've probably hit on most of the relevant highlights. I hope there are some good questions. I look forward to those questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So I'm going to stay off of mute here, but I'm going to turn it back over to our friends at South Shore and let them facilitate the Q&A.
Very good. Thank you so much, Shawn, for your presentation. Again, folks, as you can see on your control panel there, if you would just type in any questions that you might have. For that, we've got several questions that we will ask Shawn right now. So Shawn, can you talk a little bit about the scrappage process? So does this is there any requirements for where the scrappage takes place in the state of Indiana? Do they have to be to scrap an engine? Does it have to be at a certified junkyard, if you will, or a scrap yard, or are there any requirements for that?
I'll unmute myself now. There are no specific requirements on where this needs to take place. There is, however, a form that does need to be completed by the facility or the folks that are administering that scrapping process. And once again, I would say, as I've said earlier, if there are any questions that folks have about that, obviously feel free to reach out to me to get any more details. I know that the scrappage document is usually something that we make available on the website, but if you can't find it there, I know that our friends at South Shore probably have the ability to get that to you also.
So the 2022 close date of the project, does this include all work completed and all receipts received by the administering agency? So basically, is that the drop dead date for closing of the projects?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And what that date is, what that date references is the project has to be complete by that date. The project is the delivery of the new buses and the destroy or scrappage of the previous buses. All of the paperwork does not have to be completed by then. As a matter of fact, it's good, bad, or otherwise, it's pretty common for projects that have an end date of, say, December 2022 to complete in December 2022, and we're working through the reimbursement process in January, February, and March of the following year.
Great. Thank you for that. Another question is, can you talk about the reimbursement time frame with the VW administration?
Sure. So the reimbursement process, in a nutshell, is you complete the project, as we've said, you've got it done. You're going to provide to us the specific information that we'll make readily available. I mean, once you are awarded funds, at some point in the process, I'll make it really clear when you're done with the project, these are the things we're going to need from you in the reimbursement packet. There is not a form per se. There's not a bunch of check boxes. It's just a packet that, in essence, includes this is the invoice from the vendor with the total amount for the vehicles. This is a copy of the canceled check or wire transfer that shows that we, the school system, paid for these vehicles. And here is an invoice to IDEM that identifies how much the total of the project is, less how much we've paid, and this is what we're asking from you for reimbursement. So once I receive that, I go through that process of reviewing all of that information, verifying that everything that I need is there, and then we get some internal review and signatures done on that. And then once we finish our internal review process, it then gets uploaded to the Volkswagen trustee. And that's when the real clock begins, if you will, from the standpoint of timing. So depending upon how many of these things land on my desk at any given time, sometimes I'm able to get them out quickly, and sometimes it takes a lot longer than I would like to get them uploaded to the trustee. But once they're uploaded to the trustee has 60 days based on the language of the consent decree to reply back and basically say, yes, we're ready to wire the funds, or no, we have some additional questions. And they are using all of those 60 days. So what I would say, beginning to end, in a more or less perfect environment where I don't have a whole lot on my desk, which hasn't happened for about, well, at least a few years. But in a perfect environment, I would say a 90-day turnaround is reasonable. In a typical environment, it might be a little more than that.
Okay. My school corporation's been awarded previously a VW mitigation grant. May I apply again for funding?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any funding this round for fueling or charging infrastructure?
There is no funding for fueling or infrastructure. Indiana, at the very beginning of this program, we made the determination that we were going to focus all of the funds on the equipment and not the infrastructure.
Okay. Another question is, are there reporting requirements under this project, and do these reporting requirements continue beyond the 12/22 deadline?
There are reporting requirements during the award period. There are not significant reporting requirements after that. Now, what I will say to clarify that is the reporting requirements from the beginning until your project is complete are literally nothing more than me sending an email out to you every now and then with about a half a dozen questions that I ask you to answer so that I have a basic idea of where you are in your project progress. The only expectation really beyond the expiration date of the funding agreement is just that if we have folks that are interested in a technology or maybe interested in a fuel type or interested in talking to someone that has more experience with this type of bus or infrastructure, that you're open to us, sharing your contact information with them so they can pick your brain a little.
Sure. So here's a different question. Do you get extra points if you've already have fueling or charging infrastructure or an agreement for that? So basically for your fueling of an alternative fuel or an electric bus, if you've already, do you get extra points for having those already in place?
No. It's great that you do, but that's really not something that falls into the scoring criteria in any one of those categories.
Okay. So do you have any recommendations for getting a school board to support a move toward an alternative fuel bus or an electric bus?
In all honesty, I would say I don't really have anything to really offer or share there. I know that what I will say, and I think I can say safely, is overall, it's been our experience that school boards are very supportive of the concept of electric or alternative fuel school buses. And as long as you can demonstrate the value to the school system overall, they seem to be very supportive of it. On the alt fuel side, if we're talking propane, the lack of volatility in the fuel pricing is certainly a selling point, and then the zero emissions component of an all electric is certainly a selling point as well. So I mean, I guess I would just recommend that folks share that kind of information with them, but I don't have any specific recommendations per se.
Sure, and I would say on that note that Clean Cities here in Indiana would be able to assist your school organization with that education as a non-biased entity representing a technology. So we're happy to assist you with that. So do the buses have to serve a school? Can a community organization or nonprofit that uses school buses to serve youth apply? And I think you've already answered that, but you want to take that question, Shawn?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The category is basically school bus, transit bus, or shuttle bus. And those are just definitions that describe the bus, not describe what the bus is doing.
And again, Shawn, I think this is a question that maybe we can speak to, but I'll ask this question to you. Can you speak to the return on investment of an electric bus or an alternative fuel bus versus a diesel bus? I know this question comes up a lot with different school organizations, is really how to sell the additional costs or potential additional cost with some of the alternative fuels. Do you want to answer that, Shawn?
Well, I guess I would just say that, and you've touched on this, the folks at South Shore are going to be in a way better position to help folks understand that. I think you have what's called like a clean fleet or green fleet program that you do with municipalities and school systems that will give them a lot of useful information. So I mean, I think that they can rely on you all and your expertise for sure. Yeah, beyond that, no, I really couldn't say much. And I think the challenge you really have, especially in the world of electric school buses, is we're still seeing a lot of these electric school bus projects as pilot projects, relatively proven, but still pilot projects in some varieties.
Sure, and again, I think one of the things that you had just mentioned was in regards to our Green Fleet program. So we had a program called the Northern Indiana Green Fleet program that has now become a statewide program that actually does a lot of life cycle cost analysis, and really it's a business model that can be used by school administrations on the implementation not just of buses but potentially other supporting equipment. So it's looking at emissions, it's looking at upcoming purchases, and it's a great working tool to help decarbonize your school corporation. So this is something that we believe has helped us with the applications of other grant opportunities, and we foresee this as becoming as we expand throughout the state. So this is a great tool that's really incorporated not just VW funds, but other grant application and grant opportunities for school corporations. So it says under the financial reimbursement request, do you prefer to receive them on a monthly to quarterly basis or at the end of the project? So, this is a complete cost reimbursement, and Shawn can answer this, but, one of the things that we've seen on this is that until you have received the total cost of the project for your school, a bus, and then you've paid the vendor or the vendor has been reimbursed, that's the only way that you'll be able to submit this application. I know, Shawn, that you've done it maybe, say if there's an an opportunity to, if it's a multi school bus application, and potentially where a school might receive 2 buses, and then maybe 2 or 3 months later, would you allow them to invoice for those 2 initial buses that they've provided payment for? I guess that's probably the best way to phrase that question.
Yeah, and you're spot on. There isn't a monthly or quarterly option here. It's about phases of the project. So a good example is, let's say you're going to do 8 school buses and you do 4 school buses now, and you're planning to do 4 school buses 6 months from now. You can do 4 school buses, and once those have been invoiced, paid for, delivered, and the existing buses have been salvaged, you can turn that packet in for the first 4 to be reimbursed through the program. But it's not. We have to have a completed phase of the project to justify a reimbursement with the trustee.
Sure. So again, we're seeing a lot of opportunities for laboratories, like school bus laboratories. And Shawn, so here's a question: Have any schools used the vehicles as an educational tool? Meaning, would the tools for implementing a program like that be applicable with this grant program? So meaning is, if we had a school that was looking at using this as a rolling laboratory and maybe not for student transportation, would this grant allow them to take advantage of this funding opportunity?
I would say more than likely not, and the reason is twofold. First of all, the vehicle that they would have to be replacing that vehicle with the same vehicle. So, for example, the vehicle that was being used for that purpose would have to be the one that is getting replaced with the vehicle that is going to be used for that purpose. But the real issue comes up when I believe that the numbers in the RFP currently, that vehicle has to travel at least 7,500 miles per year to be eligible for funding as a replacement. And these sort of special purpose types of school buses, these are typically don't meet that minimum mileage requirement.
Sure. And I think here's a question that is not listed, but this is a question that we have received, Shawn, is in regards to the things that we're hearing on media on a daily basis about upcoming funding through Washington and through the federal government. Would it behoove our school corporation to wait to see what types of funding potentially would be available for NOx emission replacements or clean school bus replacements, or would you recommend us to apply for this funding? So it's kind of one of the things that we know that sometimes this does take a lot of work, and everything that we're hearing from potentially hearing from the federal government, that extensive grant opportunities or funding opportunities might be coming to our school corporations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on 2. I'm going to use 2 of your words there. I think you used potential and might, and I think those are really important words, and they're appropriate words for programs that folks are talking about potentially coming down the road at a later date. And it may seem self-serving, but my position there continues to be a bird in the hand, right? These funds are here. They are here now. They are available now. And applying for these funds, getting these funds would not prohibit you from getting funds from another entity or another program, a year from now.
So I'm not seeing any more questions, Shawn. Any closing thoughts before we close the webinar here?
I guess the only closing thoughts I would share are the ones that I typically share whenever we do things like these, and that is, one of the questions that folks would often wonder about is, when should we start the process? And I guess my response to that and my reminder is, the best day to have started your application was yesterday. The sooner you can start assembling the information that is necessary for an application, the sooner you can feel confident in your application and get it submitted. I know the folks at South Shore will help you put that together and help you reach that level of comfort. And then I think the other thing that that I often say to folks is, you know, the only bad application is the one I've never seen. And seems counterintuitive, but obviously the point there is, even if you don't think your project might look good on paper, even if you don't think it's big enough or has enough flash, I will never know if I don't see it cross my desk. So if you've got a project and you think it's worth pursuing, I just encourage you to do that, because the only way that I can fund any project is if I have it on my desk.
Well, very good. Again, just to remind everyone, we have another webinar that's coming up this Thursday, April 15th from 1 to 2 p.m. Central, focused on the on-road and non-road grant options for round 3 of the VW mitigation. You can register for this event on South Shore Clean Cities events page as well. And I just want to say thank you, Shawn, for your participation today. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the South Shore Clean Cities website. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us or Shawn Seals, and we'd be happy to answer or work with you on your grant application. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to a lot of great grant applications moving forward and helping our state reduce our carbon footprint. So thank you, and we will see you all soon.